Hi everyone, great to have you with me for another essential interview. This one is about finance, it's about banks and banking and the money power and gold and silver and crypto, what it all means to you and me. Important stuff. But before we get started, let me say thanks to all of you. It's your support that makes these interviews possible, so thanks again. On that note, a special thanks to all the people who signed up to my patreon.com site, because the financial support coming via that channel really is the fuel and the engine that keeps everything else going. If you're not a Patreon member yet and you'd like to be, here are the basics. Costs about £1 a week. You become members of a family. You get exclusive stuff, including a question and answer session with me every week, and early access, first access to all new content. Lots of stuff to get your teeth into. The link is below the video. I hope to see you there. Okay, now it's time to chat with Nick Ward, one of the directors of Gold Bullion Partners. My guest is Nick Ward, one of the directors of Gold Bullion Partners, and our paths crossed because obviously Nick, by definition and by profession, is interested in precious metals, and I've drifted into that territory because it's been it's been something to hold on to and something of interest in an ever-changing world. Nick, good morning.
Morning, Neil. Good to be back.
We've spoken, obviously, about metals before, gold and silver particularly, but since we last spoke, it feels as if a crazy situation has got, crazier by an order of magnitude. The price of gold is spiking upwards. Something stranger still is happening around silver. I suppose, really, can you just bring the likes of me up to date with how you understand that volatile market at the moment?
Yeah, I didn't expect it to happen this quickly, Neil. In less than 2 years, gold's doubled, which has surprised everyone in the industry, just with the sheer speed and velocity of the move that we've seen. The last time we witnessed a surge like this was back in the late 1970s, after the gold standard where it was abandoned in 71, which sent gold from $35 an ounce to over $800. And at the same time, what's really interesting is we're also seeing big movements of gold internationally, but between countries and continents, which is being made extremely secretively, if you like. In the last 4 months of the year, for example, we saw an incredible amount of gold enter the US from London. No one's quite sure where that went. Did it go to the banks? Was the government really behind it? But commercial flights were being cancelled and loaded with gold. That's quite how desperate they were getting. So although they don't advertise it, if you look at the UK trade statistics, we can actually see how much gold was leaving London. And it was about 400 tons. I mean, that is huge. And here's the key as well. What's really important to this, Neil, is according to the IMF classifications, they differentiate between what they call non-monetary gold and monetary gold. So non-monetary gold gets recorded when it moves, but the monetary gold, it doesn't, not at all, not a peep about it. So when large amounts of money move, it's shrouded in this complete in secrecy.
Why the necessity? I mean, I'm asking a naive question. It's almost rhetorical. I mean, I kind of suspect I know what you're going to say, but why aren't we entitled to know what our treasuries are doing with something as fundamental as gold?
Yeah, well, everybody asks that question. Why so much secrecy? Why? It's because gold is the true rival to the dollar. And when government control is threatened, it's essential to maintain that secrecy. They don't want us to see how far or how deep the rabbit hole goes. And a lot of insiders actually think that America knew that this summer and late autumn, the gold prices were going to increase. So they're actually front running it in order to replace the reserves that they purport to have. I like to think of it almost, an analogy I've used in the past, Neil, it's the movement of gold between nations. It's like a nuclear submarine in the deep. It's unseen, it's silent, it's immensely powerful. You only catch brief signals of it as it passages different waters or when it arrives in a dock. But beneath the surface, it's shifting the balance of power throughout the world.
Why?
This is happening really because people are losing trust in fiat money.
You started by saying that the price of gold has doubled in the last couple of years, and it's moving faster and faster at the moment. Why would someone let go of 400 tons of gold, which presumably means it's been sold? That there's been some sort of transaction. Why didn't whoever was holding that 400 tons of gold want to hold on to it to see what would happen in another year?
Well, it begs the question, doesn't it? London was running phenomenally low on it. And ultimately, we don't know, really. What I can tell you is we've been importing a huge amount ever since kind of June, July from Switzerland, obviously, in order to replenish the reserves that we've lost. But yes, the Americans have been importing it like it's going out of fashion. And of course, being the LBMA, it's the center of the world gold trading. It's where the highest amount of liquidity is. It's where all those geopolitical transactions occur. But central bankers throughout the world know exactly what's going on, and they know that they're going to have to bring gold back into the system, because if they don't, hyperinflation is going to break out worldwide. And this price action that we're seeing is the canary in the coal mine, if you like, as these are the first cracks that we're starting to see in the current financial system. But we need to remember this isn't a bubble in price as well, which is what so many people are also asking. It's not the retail public running towards gold yet. It is the central banks and the central banks only. And we're seeing a multitude of different countries like Poland, Singapore, Turkey. They're all dramatically increasing their reserves. So it's not just the big players like China, Russia, America. Everybody's doing it. The only issue is no one's discussing it openly.
You said as well that in 71 that the price went very rapidly from $30 an ounce to 800. What we've seen so far, the prices now. I mean, when I looked at it yesterday, it was £3,200 or whatever. And I don't remember now what it was in dollars, but and you say it's not a bubble. Where does this train go? Where does this rising price terminate?
The thing is, Neil, sky's the limit. I know that sounds a bit cliche, but it's not actually the value of gold increasing. It's the value of fiat currency going down, being debased. And there's no limit as to how much of that governments print. And the only way that we can try and get out of this debt trap is to carry on printing, but it just makes the problem worse and worse and worse. So it will break. Who knows where the price is going to go? We've got no idea. And I hate giving price predictions. I can probably give you a few later. I've got a few statistics written down, but goodness knows there is actually no cap, because there's no cap on fiat printing. But what's happened is the central banks, they've amassed over 1,000 tons of gold every year for the last 4 years. That's a huge, huge amount. So much so that actually to the extent that gold's now a larger holding than US dollars in all foreign central banks. So if their business model relies on printing infinite money and buying gold, doesn't that just reveal a profound distrust in the system? The public, we're all feeling it with rising inflation. Everyday people are being hurt. But what's actually starting to happen worldwide is like a new gold rush. Banks and investors are rushing to get it out. And you look at the total holdings from all the banks worldwide, we've almost touched the point of 38,000 tons, which was the amount that we held before 71, before the dollar was depegged. And before the system obviously unraveled. So these central bankers, they're not fools, they're not idiots. They understand exactly where gold's going and its role throughout history. But this it's not a bubble. What we're witnessing here is a major shift. It's a flight out of fiat currencies and into the most solid asset available. So it's the beginning of a monetary reset.
So obviously people do watch the price changing and going up, but it's like a a concept shift. It's a mindset shift. The gold is just gold. What's actually moving are the fiat currencies that are falling away. That elevator is plummeting to the ground floor, and the gold is just where gold's always been, and it just becomes more visible because the fiat currency it drops away out of sight.
Yep, exactly that. Another big problem, Neil, is a lot of the gold out there as well, because there's only such a finite amount of it. A lot of it actually isn't backed by physical reserves as well. It's like a game of musical chairs with everybody racing for the last available ounces of gold.
Is that where we're in the realms of where people invest in gold, but they're not actually holding gold? By one means or another, they're being handed some kind of promissory note entitling them to notional gold.
Exactly, yeah. You hit the nail on the head.
And is that becoming a more and more ludicrously exposed position to be in?
Absolutely. Yeah, most certainly. So because there's been such a surge in demand for physical bullion, this has coincided with the COMEX crisis. Of course, COMEX is short for the commodity exchange. And it's the largest futures trading market for gold in the world. And it was created primarily to manipulate the price of gold and controlling the price discovery. It's how it's set, really. And this system was developed in the 1970s with the explicit aim of managing gold prices, moving them up or down as desired. So traders can... What they can do, Neil, essentially, I won't get into the nitty-gritty of it because it's quite boring, I suppose, the technicals, but traders can deposit a relatively small amount of money and then sell huge quantities of futures contracts, effectively suppressing the price. It's well documented that this was the true purpose from all these declassified documents, Kissinger, etc. This was the true purpose and design of it, which was to distort the true value of gold. But the problem arises when, like we've seen this year, when everyone finally wants to take delivery of it. And when the music stops, there isn't enough to go round because they've sold too much paper and it's been sold multiple times over. So it's creating this disconnect, if you like, between paper claims and actual ounces that are available for delivery. And of course, that caused massive delays. This has happened in the past. It's not even exclusive to gold. It's reminiscent of the potato market. There was a potato market crash in 1976 when a trader with massive short positions couldn't deliver any potatoes. And that caused the entire market to implode. After that, potato trading was abandoned completely. And I suppose, really, to go back to your point about price predictions, if the paper trading system around the COMEX were to collapse, with all these unallocated positions, we could see gold soar well beyond $5,000 an ounce. I wouldn't be surprised if it went to $10,000, even $20,000 an ounce. And as for silver, $100 an ounce, that could be the beginning.
What happens before we get to silver? What happens, if all the people that have paper gold, that have contracts with people who have gold somewhere, and say it goes to £5,000 an ounce, or it gets to the point where so many people want to cash in their chips, so to speak. What impact does that have on the fiat currency, which is presumably the only option that those companies holding a certain amount of gold, the only option they have, because they in order to honour the contract, they can only pay out in currency.
Exactly that.
And they know what happens.
Too. They know it too. It's settled in fiat currency. That's the only thing they can do when there's no gold left to go around. They settle you in fiat currency and it's not worth the paper it's written on. You've just got something, a rapidly inflating asset that's worth nothing. And that's what will happen if, of course, hyperinflation kicks in. So the real crisis, it really is still looming ahead of us. And when it does happen, that's when you'll see the metals go parabolic. I hate saying that word, but it's as old as time immemorial. This is what happens.
What does that mean? What does that mean for the layman? It goes parabolic.
So that's when you can see it revaluing, basically. And especially so with silver. I know we didn't touch upon it there, but this month, Neil, I couldn't think of a more apt topic at the moment, but we've seen millions of buyers in India, and they've purchased record amounts of silver during the Diwali festival. Unprecedented buying. And India's largest refinery, actually, they ran out of stock for the first time in history. But on top of that, the free floating silver reserves in London, they dropped below the level needed for operation, for physical delivery. And that's only about 250 million ounces. So if it breaks, I think silver will be the one that breaks before gold. Who knows? But every commodity is traded in this way.
How can it still be? I mean, when I look at the silver price, and it's still, I mean, it's gone up a bit, but how can it be that places are actually running out of silver? Any layman would think, well, like that chronic shortage like that would see the price suddenly go through the roof. How do they stop the price of silver going through the roof if lots of people are clamouring for something that's in desperately short supply?
Yeah, it's the most concentrated commodity market in the world. So after the collapse of Bear Stearns, of course, in 2008, they did a lot of silver trading, obviously taken over. You've now got Scotiabank, JP Morgan, HSBC. They control the silver market. There's only a few participants, tiny little market. And what they're doing is they're suppressing the price of it with these paper positions. All the while, they're hoarding the physical asset. So it's total corruption. It really is. No one really talks about it. But when they're finally ready to let it go, they will. But I just don't think they've stockpiled enough of it yet at the moment, Neil. No one's really requested huge sums of silver. I mean, it's happened with gold quite a bit. Back in 2014, countries like Germany, the Netherlands, they were trying to repatriate their gold. But even that, it became clear that getting that back, it wasn't easy. They could hardly do it. The Germans had to negotiate for 7 years just to retrieve theirs. I suppose, imagine going on holiday, giving your friend a watch for safekeeping and coming back and him apologising and just saying, sorry, it's going to take me 3 months to give it back. You know he doesn't have it. You know he sold it. And that's the kind of trust that we're talking about here in the gold and silver space.
But silver's distinctly different, isn't it? Because silver's actually in use.
Yes.
Tech needs huge amounts of silver all the time.
Huge sums of it. And that's the beauty of silver. Not only is it a monetary metal like gold, it's also an industrial metal.
So is the shortage really just something who's actually suffering from the shortage? Because presumably the big tech companies and whatever that need it, presumably they're still getting it, or would be hearing their cries from morning till night if production would stop for them. So they must still be getting huge amounts of silver that's just being kept away from other people that want it.
It is absolutely that. It's about national security as well. The Americans won't report on how much they're consuming for weapons, etc. But the AI of things, all these data centers that they're trying to build now in order to entrap us in this digital cage, they all require huge amounts of silver. Your standard AI search takes up about 8 times more energy than just a Google search. So the power that requires is phenomenal, and they just can't build these data centers enough. But what do they need in order to do it? Well, the whole digital infrastructure is going to be based off silver. Elon Musk with his cars, his rockets, he said he's potentially looking at buying a silver mine just to guarantee supply. So yes, the beauty of it is it kind of covers both bases. It sits on the fence. It's industrial, but of course it's also monetary as well.
Is that where like, man in the street, women in the street type investors, should they, and can they get hold of gold? Does it mean that if you go to a company that, like yourself, that offers silver, is the silver just not there to be bought? And if it was, should people be grabbing it by as much as they can?
We've seen a huge shock in silver at the moment, I have to say. In the last 2 to 3 weeks of that Diwali news, it's getting very, very difficult to get hold of. The problem is in the UK, you can take delivery of it, but you pay VAT. Whereas if you keep it in storage in a bonded vault, well, then you don't. whereas a lot of people obviously like to have it in their hands. So yes, just circumstantial evidence coming from me, we're seeing a huge shortage in silver. I've never seen it like this since COVID, probably.
What happens then? Remember way back in what seems like years ago now, when there was talk of Elon Musk and Donald Trump taking cameras into Fort Knox to have a look at the gold, and then that went very, very quiet, as in it simply didn't happen. Is that why we're talking about flights being cancelled at Heathrow for passengers, so that they can shovel some gold from somewhere back into Fort Knox before anybody realises, or what does it mean?
Neil, it's looking like that. Of course, Elon Musk, he made headlines back in February, I think it was, for demanding an audit of Fort Knox. But again, we haven't heard a peep out of it since. No one's mentioned it. So over 8,000 tons of gold are supposedly stored there for the US Treasury, while the gold for the other sovereign nations that America stores it for is kept in the Federal Reserve in New York. Yet every single attempt to request an audit or an inspection has been stonewalled. They just shut it down immediately. The last official audit, for goodness sake, was in 1954. And the very last visit, I think, by Congress members was in 1973, 1974. And they took photos, right, when they went there. And these photos, they look very strange, to say the least. It is nothing like the transparent storage we see in other central banks. The picture is comical. It almost looks like a veneer, like it's been stuck onto a wall.
Wallpaper.
Yeah, exactly. With a room stacked full of gold bars to the rafters. Nothing like the normal traditional way that gold's stored. And when looking at the Fed's reserves too, there's actually only one picture of the gold there. And again, there's an open door with a facade of gold. You can't look into it. And if you study that picture, to be honest, it looks like a Hollywood set. It's embarrassing. So, I mean, when you gold and silver guys get together over coffee or something to discuss what's really going on, does anybody think there's enough, that there's the notional amount of gold in Fort Knox? Or does the community think there's just nothing in there but, second-hand cars? I mean, what's in there? Look, I have to caveat this with this is speculation.
Yeah, of course.
It's common knowledge in the industry. You speak to anybody that's worth their salt. The official figures for global reserves are a complete lie. They're totally fabricated. The G7, they claim about 50% of the world's gold at the moment. And that's roughly 20,000 tons. While the BRICS, they supposedly only account for 6,000 tons between all of them, which is about 20%. Now, in reality, of course, the US probably holds far less than the 8,000. China's, of course, is far, far more. And the evidence clearly shows it. Well over 20,000 tons have entered the Shanghai Gold Exchange since 2008. And when it enters China, it never leaves again. Even the mainstream bank, like Goldman Sachs, released a report, it was about a week or two ago, saying that it could even be more than 20,000. And the other really, really interesting thing actually about China, regardless of all the state buying, the Chinese have got a little known program called Storing Gold with the People. And this was only revealed in a Chinese press release, and it was uncovered by a gold researcher. The document was never translated into English, but it stated that China they've activated a scheme to make it easier for the public to accumulate gold privately in the retail space. But in a crisis, they can always call it back and hand it over to the government. A similar thing actually happened in South Korea after the Asian financial crisis. The government faced this huge upheaval and they instructed their citizens to convert their gold into fiat. So essentially just calling in all the privately held gold whenever they needed it. And I suppose the thing that people are now asking is, well, can it happen here?
Well, what would induce a Chinese person, or indeed any person, to hold gold that at some point when presumably it became so valuable that it mattered to the nation or the government, and that they could come and take it. Why would anyone sit on gold? And yes, and further to your point, is it how likely is it that private people sitting on a few coins here and there could be told to hand them in for the sake of the common good?
Yeah, a lot of people ask me that, Neil. What happens when gold reaches 10,000 and it's outside the system? Well, that's going to expose you to higher incentives or higher taxes to bring it back in, to bring it back into the fold. And to do that, they'll offer you a deal, I think, either a carrot or a stick, to force it back into the system. And where does that sound familiar? Well, it's like the podcast we did last year, Neil, if you remember that. It's like a modern day digital version of FDR's policy in the 1930s. And as people study history, they start seeing that there really is a possibility of this happening again. The sad truth, though, that I see is everybody's asking, how can I make money out of this? Money, 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 money. How can I become a millionaire? I've got 50 grand's worth of gold and it's going to be worth £1 million. But they're framing their mindset completely the wrong way. I know this might sound a bit pompous, but to an extent, I think, you listen to Lenin and he says, the capitalists will sell us the rope with which we'll hang them. And if you give up your gold for any quick monetary gain, you're selling your soul to the devil. You're giving it back to the system. So I think
if it's coercive, though, call it a stick or whatever, but I mean, it kind of raises an existential or a fundamental question about, do private people ever own gold? If at any given moment the state can just say, get it back in the vault.
Well, the whole reason people are buying it is just safety, security, and independence. And yes, the state may well do that. A modern gold standard will come with promises of riches. They'll only for a short time, and it will be aimed at those fighting to avoid cooperating with a BRIC coin or a Fed coin or whatever it is. But it's that forbidden fruit. They'll be tempting your greed. And if you try and operate outside the system, they'll give you a brief window of opportunity because gold will be seen as an asset of governments, not people. You're right. But of course, when that happens, inevitably, you end up with a black market. Just like with prohibition in the 1920s, you ban something, the value of it goes through the roof. And then you can sit on it until that rule's repealed. Now, if you were to have done that between the 30s and the 70s, you'd have been sat on it for 30 odd years. It's a long, long time to wait it out. But if this is generational wealth that you're looking for and something that's totally outside the system, then you may have to wait on it. You might want to cash it in and get those gains. If you don't and you try and cash it in later, they might tax you. I don't know exactly how they're going to do it, but they're going to want that gold from you. I wish I knew.
It seems to me that they must be, the mythical they must be aware, as I am, that where in the past, say in the 1930s in America regained the gold, we lived in a very different world. And I would say, probably fair to say that more Americans were patriotic, as in trusted the government, trusted the very idea of government in a very different way than do Americans now. And it's the same as, notions like conscription. People say, oh, they're going to call up all the teenagers and send them off to war. Well, I don't know, because where conscription was successful in the past, it was where people were motivated out of a sense of, love of country. Mm-hmm. And likewise, if you were where a government could sort of play on an account of goodwill with the people and say, for the good of the nation, you need to bring your gold into the banks and we'll give you a fair price, but ultimately it's for the country. We don't live in that world anymore. I mean, we might live in a world like that at some point in an uncertain future, but in a world of zero trust of authority, mm-hmm. they're not going to get much buy-in with any kind of campaign to bring your gold into the banks so that for the greater good of the country.
Exactly, and so
Nobody
many
thinks
people
like that now.
No, everyone looked at the papers in the 30s and they got this overwhelming sense of national pride, and so many of them went and did it. Of course, the government then screwed them. Yes, they offered them $20 on the outside. They revalued it higher. The general public lost out by about 67%. So people have learnt from the past, and that's back when they actually did care. They, like you said, they had trust in their government. Now we're governed by a load of globalists that actively are trying to destroy us. They hate us. So do they honestly think people are going to hand it in? No, I don't think they will. And I'm not encouraging anyone to fall foul of the law or anything like that. But I think you've just got to sit back, know what they're up to, know that it isn't going to be the end of the world. There is light at the end of the tunnel. But in order to avoid them inflicting as much pain on us as they possibly can, just get some gold, get it out the system so you've still got autonomy and control, because they are going to revalue it at some point. It's as clear as night follows day. Gold's coming back into the system. It's re-entering the system. There's not enough gold out there, Neil, for them to fully back every currency anyway. Even if they try and do it, there's just simply not enough. Are figures kept that indicate how many, private man in the street holders of gold there are? What percentage of the population have any at all? Yeah, this is quite an old statistic. It's about 4 or 5 years old, and it may have gone up slightly, I think, for now. But in America and the UK, I believe now, less than 0.5% of the population even own gold at all.
Really?
And statistically, actually, Neil, it used to be about 2 to 2.5% of all assets were held in gold. A lot more people in the UK used to hold it. Buying of gold sovereigns. It used to be a thing I remember my grandfather doing every single week, every month, even in his 80s and 90s. He'd always buy them.
So it's a not. It's nobody. In everyday speak, you're talking about nobody holding any gold.
No. They don't. Not many of the general public actually have it. So many people are still not awake to the fact that their money in the bank is not safe. They don't actually own anything there at all. It doesn't even exist. Because I suppose they're so unused, again, to the unknown. It's not something that most people have done historically in the past, because we've never really seen a 1929 event and a huge full-on crash in the markets. But I just encourage everybody, get some of these, just even if it's a few sovereigns, just get something, get it out the system. This is what they look like. You can see they're not very big. Doesn't take up a lot of room to hold them. You can easily squirrel 10 or 20 grand's worth away without it taking up much space at all now.
I'm very aware. I mean, you were the same. People are panicky about anything at all to do with finances. I mean, you say that people aren't awake, but I think there's definitely a burgeoning anxiety. Yeah. The message that money in the bank basically doesn't exist, and it's worthless anyway. And that zeitgeist is out there. That mood music is out there, and I talk to people and who speculate about what the hell to do. Is there anywhere you can squirrel away a bit of wealth in any form? Yeah. And again, I mean, the last time we spoke, we mentioned crypto, and I can't have this conversation with you without, raising the spectre of, let's say, Bitcoin as just a catch-all term. Mm-hmm. That's going. I'm watching these things like soap operas that I've become addicted to. I watch the gold and silver soap opera, and I watch the crypto. Soap opera, because I just find it absolutely compelling to watch, and the twists and turns of it. And even I, with my, a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing, I feel I know enough about Bitcoin to know that looks like a rug that could get pulled. It's a 2.3 trillion market capitalization of something that for the average man in the street it just doesn't exist. And yet it's valued thusly.
Look, I still am a proponent of Bitcoin to an extent. But I suppose, look, to start with, this really actually goes back to Tether, which is so important when looking at gold reevaluation. I suppose we can come on to that later. But Trump has given regulatory authority through the Genius Act and allowed something called a stablecoin. So Tether and Circle, that's what they're called, to exist. And just in case anyone in the audience doesn't know what a stable coin like Tether is, it's a stable coin pegged to the dollar, and it's used by crypto traders to facilitate faster transfers across platforms. Tether to Bitcoin being the prime example. Now, Tether is buying as much gold now, actually even more, every single month as China. It is huge. But what's also really interesting is Tether's now the seventh largest buyer of US treasuries, US debt. And you might be thinking here, well, this is odd. They brought out a stable coin. It's fighting their own central bank currency. But basically, Tether are prime buyers of treasuries, all the US debt, at a time when treasuries are having record low auctions in the market. Nobody internationally wants them anymore. No one wants American debt. The Chinese don't. We seem to be a buyer, but not to the extent that we were. Yet Tether's buying just as much as a country, as a sovereign country. So what they're effectively doing is creating a proxy demand for US debt by supporting a few private stablecoins.
They're pumping the price of something that's otherwise of no value.
Yes, exactly. But they still maintain complete control and oversight whilst pulling the strings behind the scenes. And because these stable coins are going to be the buyer of last resort for the US treasuries, it's critical for the US to push more trading in equities and commodities through them. And that's why you'll see they're heavily supporting new exchanges using tokenization. And many private companies are jumping on the bandwagon. They're all eager to adopt these because, well, settlement becomes instantaneous. They can save money. You look at today, Neil, if someone's got a standard share trading account in their pension or whatever it is, it takes about 2 days, but under a fully tokenized for a share to settle. But in a tokenized system, it's efficient.
So they're simultaneously buying all the gold. Is that because they're trying to establish a kind of a gold standard for digital money? Are they trying to suggest, or are they actually saying that the stable coin, the USDT or whatever, is underwritten by gold?
Yeah, they're trying to underwrite it with gold at the moment. It's still early days. This really is in its infancy, Neil, but the West sees this as essential to increasing demand for treasuries and maintaining control. This is how they're going to. It's the biggest market shift we've seen in 50 years. They're moving us towards a true CBDC, but under the guise of a stable coin. And of course, look, they're not called CBDCs for now to avoid any alarm, but this is an invisible transition. It's happening quietly. It's right in front of us, but it's a wolf in sheep's clothing. And because they control those players, they've effectively created a centralized CBDC in all but name. Now, when looking back at the gold, the Russians have even come out a few weeks ago and they just called a spade a trowel. They point blank said the US is only doing this to hide the true extent of their debt. And what their plan is to address the dollar's declining trust is to shift the world into the crypto cloud, effectively offloading US debt onto everybody else, so socializing the loss, if you like. And over time, the debt gets wrapped into stable coins. The US devalues that debt and then revalues the gold. So tokenization and Tether, they're going to be like the new petrodollar, if you like. This is how they're going to do it. And this is why sometimes I think the harsh reality.
If people can already see it coming before it's here, and you're describing it as a wolf in sheep's clothing, why would it work? You know, it feels like it's a strategy that's hold below the waterline. You know, it's not a wolf in sheep's clothing. It's just a wolf. People don't believe, are not fooled by the sheep's clothing at this stage before it's even happened.
Yeah, but the thing is, people will get excited about fast crypto gains. There's a direct connection between Tether and the centralization of everything. I think that's pretty easy to see. And as Tether gets bigger, it takes the pressure off the Fed to print money. to buy those treasuries. So you can get the public to do it for you by creating a boom in digital assets. It'll be in all the headlines. It'll be in the memes. Tether is very programmable. It's very traceable. All the things that are scary in a CBDC are just as scary in Tether. And I suppose that now leads us on to Bitcoin, really, Neil. When it comes to this, I think it's something we should definitely be taking really seriously. And again, I'm not criticizing the asset itself at all, but there's a lot of politics and power involved with it. Call me a bit of a tinfoil hat. I think everybody knows that by now. But I always wonder who really created Bitcoin. Around 70% of the market remains eerily static. It's just sat there. We've got no idea who holds it. And the way that I view it is it's very much like AI and CBDCs.
Why is it never used as currency? Well, I mean, the whole the Bitcoin ethos in terms of, the Bitcoin white paper back in '08 and all of the rest of it was supposed to be a digital currency. And then you got things like, the purchase of the pizzas and so on and so on. It was supposed to function as a medium of exchange.
Yeah.
And doesn't, and never has.
Mm-hmm.
And its main attraction for most people is this kind of like digital gold, this store of wealth. But obviously it's very different from gold in that respect. But why has it never been used yet as a medium of exchange?
Being cynical, Neil, I think, look, when countries struggle, inflation spirals, social unrest increases, centralization always follows. And history shows us that pattern from the extremes, actually, on both ends of the spectrum, whether it's left or right. And Bitcoin is more centralized than ever. You've got ETFs like BlackRock, who, funnily enough, about 3 years ago hated Bitcoin. They're managing a 50 billion fund now. Why have they changed so suddenly? Why? Bitcoin, it was meant to be this apolitical, anti-dollar, fully decentralized. Look, Trump even called it a scam 3 years ago, and now he's talking about a Bitcoin reserve. So why the sudden shift? He clearly fears the BRICS leaving the dollar. Why is he now praising Bitcoin, whose whole narrative is anti-dollar? And look, I again, being really, really cynical, going back to that collaboration between Kissinger and OPEC, where they artificially inflated the oil price in order to pay off America's Vietnam War debts. I wonder whether there's something similar at play here as well now with Bitcoin. Is it politically inflated to create a bubble, then used as a funnel to transfer all the money into Tether? It's a really calculated move, but it's easing pressure on the Fed since no one wants their bonds. And in my view, I think I'm sure this strategy has to have been carefully planned for years. I really do. And the irony is, Bitcoin is not nearly as decentralized as it's made out to be at all. Is it just another classic psyop, sold as a rebel, but it's secretly controlled? I don't know. And again, you look at Glenn Lilly, who's an NSA veteran. He developed the deep hash program. So Bitcoin, I think it's back in 2001. So all the dots are connected. Was it created in Langley by the CIA? It's looking increasingly likely.
I'll get into trouble just for saying what I'm about to say, because it's such a febrile world out there when it comes to Bitcoin. But I talk to and listen to people that talk about, because there's the Bitcoin we're talking about here that's worth 100 and odd £1,000 a pop is BTC. Mm. And then there's also a largely concealed BSV, right, which is there in the shadows, and its proponents and its advocates describe it as the original Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And that it still adheres to the decentralized, neutral organic growth, finite supply, legacy addresses starting in a 1. It adheres to all of that. Now, these are not necessarily my words. These are the words of the people that I listen to that advocate BSV as, quote, the original Bitcoin. And they insist that what happened was that there came a time when there was a fork in the road, and effectively the authorities hijacked Bitcoin and took it off, and then it became this thing that's now worth, 100,000 plus. And the advocates of BSV say, well, all well and good, but it can never function as a digital medium of exchange, a commoditized data, because the fork in the road took it away from all of that. I mean, like I say, it would be bombarded probably with people saying, heresy and all of the rest of it. But I do know that there's an entity now, Terranode, which is the means by which BSV would operate as a medium of exchange for microtransaction. You could buy a cup of coffee or a sandwich with a fraction of a BSV. Now, there's so much out there in that. There's so much uncertainty out there for people. How is the average person in the street supposed to find enough hours in the day to even begin to distill from all of it what might help them in their day-to-day lives?
If you were just to type that into Google, say BSV is a hard fork of Bitcoin, and that's how I've traditionally seen it. I really have. And I have not really been paying too much attention to that at all. But in this space, there's just a rabbit hole after rabbit hole after rabbit hole to go down. Everyone's really, really partisan about their own camp because they've got a vested interest in blowing that asset up, etc. But what does worry me is the fact that America is now so pro-Bitcoin. Are they engineering a bubble to drive all this interest in there? And
obviously the Bitcoin they like is BTC.
Sorry, say that again.
The Bitcoin that Trump's talking about now is BTC. That's the tag.
Yeah.
And there's BCH, which is another one that's got questionable. It's got questionable authenticity, if any, and all of the rest of it. No, but to get you back to where people can possibly, because everything, so many things, so many roads lead to gold. You've mentioned revaluation, more than once in relation to all of this. What, in all likelihood, what is that reevaluation going to look like, and when might it happen?
I don't know. There's two rival. What are you looking in the east or the west, Neil?
In relation to, say, BRICS, because obviously BRICS have suggested that they would have a partially gold standard token, a medium of exchange for that would be partly local, partly domestic currencies, partly gold. Mm-hmm. That would be a BRICS medium of exchange.
Yeah,
go
absolutely.
There first if you want. What would that do? How would that revalue gold?
It would. So the BRICS are building a system called the unit, which is 40% backed. And people have done the calculations, and even a 20 to 40% backing of either the US or China's currency, either one, it would mean the gold price would be between $10,000 and $40,000 an ounce, even at such a small backing. And of course, there isn't enough gold for it to go around to 100% backing. The Saudis are now dealing with China and other currencies. Russia and India are trading oil outside the dollar altogether. Just going back to the Saudis, actually, going off piste a bit, it's really interesting to look at them because they don't come anywhere near the top holders in the official figures of gold. But every time I personally fly out to Switzerland, they always mysteriously emerge as these big buyers. They've got so much gold that no one even knows about. But the other thing that the Chinese are doing, Neil, they're building huge vaults in Hong Kong, Saudi, soon to be Latin America, to store gold, so they can settle trade imbalances between the countries. And look, we've known they wanted to do this for ages. Again, WikiLeaks dump back in 2009. It showed that they are intending to do this in order to kill two birds with one stone, if you like. First, because it would help internationalize the renminbi. And secondly, because the West has historically tried to prevent gold rising through the paper markets to increase the prestige of their own currencies. But they're not even hiding this anymore, Neil. They're going straight, they're going fully 40% backed currency. And what's also speeding up that decline as well is the fact the US continues to weaponize the dollar against Russia, Iran. They played their hand. The BRICS have now said, look, there's no going back. The only thing that we can trust is gold because it's no one's liability and we don't need anyone's permission to use it. So more and more and more of these nations are avoiding the dollar, which is fascinating to watch because there's a new global trade order that's taking shape and gold's at the very heart of it. And no matter how it plays out in East or West, gold's going to be the foundation of the next system. And I believe that the US is going to be forced to bring in so much more gold in order to try and stop the BRICS getting that advantage because they've got a head start at the moment. And the smart money, the billionaires in the West, they can see what's coming on. They're already preparing. They're the largest people that are buying it privately as individuals. But what worries me as well is that I suppose it's the next phase of this, Neil. It's clear it's not going to be easy because there's not going to be an agreement between East and West. What's the alternative going to be? If they can't figure something out, well, is it war? You see every Western leader, Macron, everybody else, they're saber rattling. They're telling their people to prepare for war. There's just this impending sense of doom all the time, like something's happening. And that's what I don't want. And I think that's why, well, nobody does, but America are also contemplating this reevaluation as well. It's not just the Chinese and the Russians now. So
why wouldn't there just be a global revaluation of gold that affects East and West at the same time? I mean, there's a global price now. Why can't there be a global price then?
When they reset it, they each individually want their own system that serves their own interests. You know, there is no way now at this stage I could see China and Russia and America coming to the table, all having a great big hug and thinking, you know what, we're going to do what's best for humanity in the world and come up with a currency that everyone can rely on that's fully backed. They just won't do it. It's all about national security. I can't see that happening. But basically, the Fed in an official paper now, and it's shocking to see this in an official paper from America. They know that if they do reevaluate gold, they revalue it, it could balance their books straight away. And there's a commentator called Clive Thompson who's done a lot of calculations on research in this, and he thinks it would push gold to about $15,000 an ounce. But even then, Neil, that would only wipe out a year's worth of debt.
Yeah, that's not enough. And that's. I mean, you know, you're talking about the global. I always remember being told at school there were 3 Olympic-sized swimming pools worth of gold. Yep. It's not a lot. I mean, on planet Earth, it's not a lot. I bet it's a cube about 50 feet on a side or something. And clearly, without any arithmetic ability, if that's all there is, if making it 15,000 an ounce isn't going to do it. Not in the face of these quadrillions of financial debt and all of the rest of it that's floating about out there. And what the hell happens? I mean, well, yeah, I don't really need. You know, if they suddenly revalue at that level, all the fiat currencies just. That's when you get into that scenario where people are pushing wheelbarrows full of £1 billion notes in hope of buying a loaf of bread. I mean, that's that insanity.
It is. So that's what we saw with Weimar Germany, of course. People were pushing wheelbarrows around of Deutschmarks because the currency had utterly collapsed. And that's eventually what we'll see again. But yeah, I think going back to it, Neil, that was a really, really conservative estimate, that $15,000 an ounce.
It would have to be.
Yeah. But because what's incredible when you look at the US is actually how they're holding their gold assets on their balance sheet, on both the Federal Reserve and the Treasury balance sheets. So it's a classic case of double accounting. Shocking. Anyone else would it'd be illegal for any business to do that.
So they're underwriting 2 different sets of debts with the same gold.
Exactly. Yeah, couldn't put it more succinctly. So what that means is, again, getting into the technicals of it, but the Federal Reserve, they don't own gold. So under the 1934 Act, the Fed transferred its gold to the US Treasury, to the government. And in return for the gold, the Treasury issued gold certificates to the Fed, which are purely accounting items. That's all they are. These certificates they're book entries valued at the statutory price of $42 an ounce, not the current market price we see at the moment. So the Fed's asset, the Fed's gold, not physical. And while the Fed's balance sheet includes old certificate gold, it's just a representation of the dollars that were created for those certificates, not a claim on the physical gold itself or its real market value. The gold itself is in the possession of the Fed, or supposedly in possession over in Fort Knox.
Somebody's got to get just straightforwardly realistic about this. In the way that, you or I would if you were sort of confronted with the nature of the conundrum. Someone just has to say gold is worth this.
I know. And look, I don't know whether they're going to do it in the short term. I think revaluing it actually could be highly beneficial, but for a very short period of time. But it's really risky because, well, Russia and China just have so much more of it. There's a huge disparity in holdings. And yeah, eventually, yes, everyone is going to have to get realistic. Every central bank balance sheet is going to have to be shored up with gold. But like I said, the tensions are so high that coordinated effort is unlikely. That there'll be a bifurcated system where one side is using gold in a certain way and the other employs it in a different one. The problem at the moment is, I think it's rapid change. That's what they fear the most at the moment. With the high levels of debt that we've got in the system, the market crashes. 1929 style event. We've never seen stock markets this overvalued ever. And of course, when we saw the 1929 crash, the market didn't recover for years and years and years.
But as you say, the last time, well, not the last time, it happened cyclically, but in 1914, the banks around the world, because of their already fraudulent behaviour, they were already fractional reserve banking at that point, even while they were still on the gold standard. And how did they get out? Well, just surprise, surprise, the whole world went to war. And then the emergency measures didn't just get the banks out of the hole, they flipped the whole system so that the banks told governments what to do, where previously governments had told banks what to do. As Gerald Celente says, when all else fails, they take you to war. And you've already raised the spectre of it.
Mm-hmm. Every single time. It's the last thing. It's the last distraction. They distract you with a war on the right hand whilst they're doing something completely different with the left. It's a perfect magic trick every time. And that's what I fear the most. It really is.
On that realistic note, Nick, I think I've taken up enough of your time. I think we'll just have to leave that there for this time.
No, I know. I could go on forever about it, Neil, but yeah.
Well, it'll only be a matter of a short time before we simply have to update this conversation. So until then, Nick Ward, thank you.
No, pleasure, Neil. Always. Take care.